Howdy. Welcome. We are working on JavaScript. This is our first JavaScript video. First thing I'd like to talk to you guys about, what is JavaScript? Well, so in some ways JavaScript will operate, or at least will use similar concepts to what we've done with Python. So things like looping should not be new to you. Things like data types should not be new. That will all be very similar. JavaScript is a little bit more explicit of a language. When we're typing it, we're asking it to do things. It actually requires a little bit more specificity. It requires a little bit more detail in how we're actually writing it out, which for some of you will be very refreshing. Some of you will have been a little bit frustrated with how Python often took care of our problems for us, and you would have rather been able to talk about your problems to Python on your own. Others of you will say, this is annoying, why can't I just write Python? I already know how to write this stuff. Why do I have to write extra details? Just giving you a little bit of heads up. And if you really do like JavaScript better as a language, if you like the explicit aspects of it, and by explicit all I mean is being detailed and it's a little more finicky, we'll say, than Python. If you like that, then looking into languages like C#, some of the other more powerful coding languages, some of the faster ones, then I highly recommend furthering your studies in that direction. If you don't, that's fine too, but it is one of, if not the most popular language that just like loads of, okay, not the most popular language. I suspect more people know HTML than JavaScript but extraordinarily popular. Nearly every web page has JavaScript running on it of some sort. It's very useful for interacting with users. It is what's called it's called a scripting language, which a scripting language is a language. A scripting language is a language that operates inside of another language, right? So we've seen this with our HTML, where in the head of our document we'll have script tags in there, and then we'll have either a URL or a link to another document, that kind of a thing, and that is your actual where your JavaScript is hosted. You can write JavaScript inline with your HTML if you'd like to, or you can make an entire separate JavaScript file and import that into your code and inject it, and it will actually interact with your HTML in some really cool ways. This is different than Python, which is a programming language, which is meant to create like applications and programs of its own. I've never heard of anybody writing an entire application, like an application in JavaScript. People make games with it. I guess that does kind of count. People make games with it online, that sort of a thing. But that's going to be different than writing backend. You're not going to write server content with JavaScript. Anyways, so that's a little bit about what JavaScript is, some of the differences between what it is and what we're going to be working with. And now let's see some stuff. Well, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to have our folder here. You'll also notice that my little bubbles on the left side of the screen now, because we're going to be looking at stuff on the right side of the screen quite a bit today. But for right now, we're going to, in our folder, we're going to make an index.html. That'll be easy. You don't really need any CSS, but we are going to actually just have one CSS file. So we'll have main.css, and all we're going to put in there is, for everything here, for this document, we'll have the background color will be dark slate gray. All right, so that means that our whole document will just have this color in the back, and that'll be nice. But we don't have any in HTML yet. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to have main.js. So for our index.html, we're going to keep it really simple, and it should not take long at all. We're just going to go with the plain, a little one. We don't need Bootstrap. We're going to call this JavaScript day 1. We'll have an H1 right here, and it will say JavaScript basics. All right. Now we're going to add a link here to our main.css, and then we're going to add a script tag here, and source is going to be equal to main.js. And that's pretty much all we're doing for HTML. Delightful, right? Really short, really easy. Because we're going to have this here, and then all of the stuff we're going to be messing around with is going to be in our main.js folder today. Now, I would like to open this up in a live server today. Bing! Ta-da! And we're going to inspect it. Because in particular, so this stuff's all fine. Our CSS did its thing, whatever. You can see we've got our nice dark slate gray background. If you'd like to change the color of JavaScript basics, you can. But we're going to go to our console, and it's mad. Why is it mad? Well, because we don't have anything in our JavaScript file. So it's trying to pull our JavaScript, but we haven't done anything yet. And it's going, hey, Houston, we have a problem. I don't know what to do. So we're going to give it some things to do. So let's head back over to our JavaScript. We'll start out with a comment, which again, you can do command / or control / if you're on Windows. And then we're just going to have basics of JavaScript, which is remarkably hard to type. Okay, first things first, we're going to do a multi-line comment, okay, which is just like this. So you can have, hey, Mom, look at my multi-line comment. Let's put it on the fridge. Okay, other things, so we'll have some primitive, goodness gracious, primitive data types. In JS, we'll have strings, integers, booleans, floats, arrays, which are a lot like lists, or Python lists, objects, very, very similar to Python dictionaries. We have functions in JS, which is very cool. We've got loops. We've already talked about scripting versus programming language. But if you want more information on that, you can Google it. All right. And then we're going to finish our multi-line comment. Now everybody's happy. Life's groovy. Okay, are you happy yet? Yes, you are. There is some content. It did not do anything. It's just a comment, so there's nothing here. But now there is at least something that exists in the JavaScript files. It's not telling us, hey, you fed me something empty, and I don't know what to do with that. It makes me not feel very well. So it at least feels better, knowing that it's not supposed to do anything. All right, well, let's do some things. So we're going to have string variables. And we're going to say var first name equals Zach. Huzzah! Okay? Display the value in JavaScript. I'm just going to do JS. I don't even care. Right? And we're going to do, this is like our print statement. Okay? So now over here, boom, Zach. Cool! Right? So now that's live. And you can see over here, this is the line where that's at. And if you pop it open, if you click on it, right, it will actually open up the JavaScript. I'm going to just bump this all the way over here because we don't need any of the HTML today. But you can see that line 14 on our main.js is where our variable is declared, right? So if we go back to here, actually our console, line 17 is where that was declared. That's where it came from. Very useful for debugging because it does not tell you where it was printed. It tells you where it came from. That's not true. It does tell you where it was printed. But if you go back here, now you can actually see that it is declared on line 14. So, next thing. Assign an integer. Cool, we can do those too. Delightful. Var some number equals 32. One other thing. The semicolon here. Sometimes it will need it, sometimes it won't. It's best practice to put it basically at the end of every like finished line, so it would have been good to put that there too. It's what's called syntactical sugar, where in other languages, in the more explicit languages, that you have to have this kind of thing because that's the way that the compiler knows when you're done writing a line, rather than like a new line kind of a deal. With this one, you've got this semicolon, and when we talk about syntactic sugar, these are things that they don't change the way the code runs, but it's either common practice to write this way, or it is. So I'll give you a Python example, right? You don't have to have this. You don't have to even actually sandbox.py. When we do our while loops, right, we could say, a num equals 5, while a num, okay, right, and you print something or whatever, right? And it'll do this indefinitely because a num is true. We could also do this, right? And this is only if we're testing it equal to 5, or we could set this to true, equal to true. And you don't necessarily have to have this part on there, right? You can just have this and it will end up printing something. And I'm not going to run this code because that'd be a disaster. But that's the idea, right? You don't have to have that. It's basically to help you read it if you want to put that in there. And JS has that. These semicolons are not necessary, but they are common practice. They're normal. And so that's what we mean by syntactic sugar. It's not like the meat and ooh. Anybody want an emoji? I bumped a button. No, go away. All right. Anyways, yeah, it wasn't not necessary. Kind of like sugar is not really all that important to your diet, but it definitely makes things better. Sorry if you're anti-sugar. I'm gonna go eat a donut after I'm done. But let's see, console log some number, right? We're gonna print it out. So we got console.log some number. Okay, I head over here. It's got to think about it. And there's our 32. Ta-da! Printed from line 21. There we go. We're going to show all attributes. Show all attributes. This might be useful one day. Of a document or ID. And we'll do console.dir document. Brandon, where's the document from? Okay, the document here, in this case, JavaScript automatically will end up referring to whatever document you're inserting it into. Because we're running the JavaScript on our HTML. So if I were to call the same JavaScript on a different HTML file, it would run on that one. And so then this console.dir would end up having different outputs based on which file you put it into. But now we're over here. Wow, cool. Look at all this stuff. And these are all things that eventually you'll be able to actually work with, right? So these things are all of these on, mouse over, on, mouse up, on, and mouse wheel. Those are really useful for games. So you can actually use those things as what are called event listeners. We'll get there when we get there. But essentially, you can write JavaScript to wait until something happens, an event, where you mouse over a certain item, and then when you mouse over that item, the JavaScript says, ooh, he moused over it, do something, and something cool will happen, right? But all these different attributes of our HTML, and so obviously there's things that we're more familiar with, right, where we've got doc type HTML, document elements are in HTML, all these other things like this, and so this is just all the attributes, all the background sneaky secret stuff. And if you want to learn about more of these, just type one into Google and see what happens, right? And see what it has to say. Just JavaScript and cookies, right? Or JavaScript base URI. Cool stuff. I'm going to collapse that back down again. But that's another nifty thing about the console is that you can dig into this as far as you'd like and all the things you want to mess around with. Pretty cool stuff. So there we go. We're going to do a float variable. Var sum float equals 3.14159 to whatever. I'm not writing out all of pi. And you aren't either because you can't. Console log. I got terrible fingers today. Some float. That'll spit that out here. Neat. After that, let's have an array. Var sum array equals 1, 2, 3, 4. Console.log sum array. Woo! Pretty cool. Now, this is a nifty thing with arrays, right? So you've got your array here. Delightful. It also tells you the length of it. And you can pop this down, and index 0 is 1, index 1 is 2, index 2 is 3, and index 3 is 4. The length is 4, and we have a prototype of an array that also has a lot of attributes to it, which you're not likely to need, but there's also all these things you can do on it. You know, you can map, pop, push, reduce. We'll get some of that stuff later. But these are all different functions you can call, these built-in functions on our array there. Super neat. On to the next one. And I'm going to try and keep scrolling down so my face doesn't get over it. Object variable. So var some object equals, and this is it's very similar to a dictionary, right? You'll remember from Flask that we were passing objects, right? The JSON objects back and forth, right? So we could have, remember our ye, ha, a little bit, right? And then you could console.log some object. Okay? Are we mad? Nope. Here we go. Okay? So we've got our key value pair there. There's other stuff we can do to it. There's getting and setting. That's fun stuff that'll play into Java. By the way, Java and JavaScript, not related. Okay? JavaScript was originally supposed to be called, I think, like LiveScript or something else like that. It had some other name that was nothing to do with Java. And Java was taking off in popularity, and I believe the legend goes that they changed the name to JavaScript to ride off the popularity of Java. And now it just confuses everyone. So, that's why it's called JavaScript. It is not related to Java. It is not written the same way as Java. There are some things that are similar, right? Like, again, Java's got while loops and for loops and if-else statements. So does JavaScript, so does Python, right? Part of that's just how code operates. But they are not actually related. Also, fun fact, free trivia, not related. If you're ever wondering, like, is Java a language or a platform or what? It's both. It's made by Oracle. The idea is that since it's a platform and a language, if you install the platform, the language will run on your whatever it is. And that's nifty because then you don't have to worry about, does their computer have a Mac, or is it a Linux, or is it Windows, because they all have Java installed on them, and that ends up actually being the compiler that translates that code for you. Kind of neat. And so that's very clever. It's also a pain in the butt to work with. Anyways, that was free. End rant. Back to JavaScript. Just wanted to clarify, too, that JavaScript and Java are different because they have the same word in them, and neither of them bring me coffee. JavaScript hoisting. So hoisting, JavaScript actually starts the very first line. It goes line by line through this stuff, and normally if something doesn't work, it gets stuck and breaks. And hoisting allows us to not use things before they're declared. I really am not sure when you would really want to use this. It's kind of considered bad practice, but it's a thing. And if you run into people who are prone to bad practices, right, you might run into this and you say, oh no, you're hoisting. That's not supposed to happen, right? So for example, I could write a num equals 10, console.log a num, okay? Now, I never had this little var thing. We haven't talked about the var thing. So var is just a variable. It's an older JavaScript declaration. In Python, we just start writing things, right? Like in Python, I could just say, like, this would be totally fine and considered good Python. This is considered bad JavaScript, right? Alternatively, if I had var enum, right, that's good. And you have to tell it kind of what it is, right? And the more explicit languages, right, that I'm talking about, okay, so C#, Java, those ones, like, they really want you to tell them what it is you're dealing with. Some of them will even want you to tell them what kind of data is supposed to come out of a function, right? So if you're doing a math function, you need to have int as the expected returned data type, right? So it's very, very interesting. Anyways, I digress. Here, we need to have that var there, otherwise it's considered bad JavaScript. In this case, the number will run anyways. But if you try to do this with a... well, actually, we'll do it this way, right? We'll put it afterwards. And we'll end up getting back a reference error. Oh, no! Okay? It's not defined. It's you never told us what that was, and I'm trying to spit it out. So we got this little red angry thing, okay? And you can actually click on this and it will say, look, it's literally right here, okay? I don't have a num yet. That's the problem, okay? But with other ways of setting this up, let me actually put this back so that runs fine. I could then say var a num, and then console.log a num. And then it's happy. This obviously works too. Those both end up working. But in this case, we're actually kind of hoisting. And a better example would be if we console.log some random variable, right? In this case, it should, yep, it's not defined. And it's interesting because the last time I did this, it returned a none type. Let me just see if I can do, maybe I just haven't finished the code yet. Some random variable equals, this is a random variable. What are we getting now? Okay, now it's undefined. So that's actually properly hoisting, where it's pulling things out of order. And then if I were to write afterwards, console.log some random variable, and now it will spit out, this is a random variable. So now it's happy, now it's okay. But this, in this case, that's undefined, and again, still runs, but returns undefined, which is basically a none type. Not good practice. But again, if you run into it out there in the wild, it does exist. It is out there. So a better way of declaring a variable is by using let or const keywords, right? And so with these ones, with these ones, let and const has a little bit of a difference. Let will allow you to rewrite the value. So if you say like let x equals 5, and then you can also say, you can console log it x, delightful. Okay, but then I could also just say x is now equal to 3 and console.log x, right? And it will rewrite it. It'll overwrite it there, okay? Now, you might be saying, well, okay, but you just told us we have to have var or let or const, apparently, in front of here. The thing is, I already declared it. There's a difference between declaring and actually giving it a value, okay? Because I could also say, just let x, right? And in this case, it should return undefined. Yep, it has no value. There's none type, right? That's what we were talking about a moment ago. There's a none type there, okay? And then I can give it a value later. Not a problem. Just be aware, you don't have to actually give it a value yet, which can be, again, be very valuable when you are writing a function and you want to have something exist, but you haven't given it any data yet. You haven't actually created any of the information for it, and somewhere in the function you actually end up doing that. Then that's actually valuable. That sort of a thing. But that's how let works right there. Const, on the other hand, const y, okay? I can console.log y, right? We should get back. Yeah, now it's mad. So let y equals 5, and now it will be happy. So now it says, aha, see, 5, delightful. Now what if I try to overwrite this? Okay, y equals 6. Okay, console.log y. I'll give you a heads up, it's going to be mad. Okay, that's because a constant variable is constant for a reason. It is not supposed to move. It's not supposed to change, okay? And so constant is going to be something that you set, and then you're not going to change it at all. It's great for writing functions, because you're not going to change your function, right? You might change what you put into the function, but the actual body of the function is not going to change, and you want that to stay still. You don't want to rewrite that or overwrite that or delete your function accidentally, that kind of thing. Okay, so calling it a const there is really useful. Also, consts are often used for things that you're going to import and export. We'll get to that. That's way down the road. But you guys are already familiar with that idea from Python, where in Python we have the modules that we're importing and moving around. JavaScript has the same kinds of things, especially once we get to React, and we're moving lots of things all over the place. So those consts are going to be things that don't move, and that will be nice. We are going to break here before we go into math operations, because math is for nerds and takes brain power. We are all nerds here, but it's good to take a break before we have to use too much brain power, because even great nerds need naps. Anyways, good to see you all. That will be a lesson, and I'll see you in the next video. Adios.